Change is inevitable among all aspects of life. The changing nature of community structure across the landscape reflects the shifting distribution of population in response to changing environmental conditions, as modified by the direct and indirect interactions among the component species. Yet, the physical and biological structure of the community also changes through time. It is dynamic, reflecting the population dynamics of the component species. A blessed day to all. This chapter discusses the changing pattern of community structure through time. The following topics are to be discussed. This video is divided into three parts.
The world is constantly changing. New islands are being created, fires burn in forests, volcanoes explode and destroy areas. Nothing remains the same, and habitats are constantly changing. Ecological succession is a process by which an ecological community undergoes changes following a disturbance or the initial colonization of a new habitat. For example, the islands of Hawaii were formed from volcanic activity. From their fiery start, over time they became tropical islands. There are two main types of succession: primary and secondary. Primary succession occurs in new areas that have little or no soil. In other words, the area has been almost completely destroyed or is newly formed. For example, new islands can be created from lava flows. The lava creates a new land without soil. A volcano may destroy a very large area. This would be an example of primary succession. Over time, dirt is formed, plants begin to grow, and a forest or a grassland may return. The first species that colonized this new land is called the pioneer species. Lichen and moss are many times pioneer species. Secondary succession occurs when an existing ecosystem has been destroyed or disturbed. They are more minor in magnitude compared to a primary succession. For example, a forest fire may destroy a large area of trees and plants, or flooding can destroy an area. In this before and after picture, the fire destroys plants, but the soil remains. 2 years later, the forest has grown back. Here is how secondary succession may occur. Fire destroys plant growth. The fire leaves behind empty but not destroyed soil. Grasses and other plants grow back first. Small bushes and trees begin to colonize the area. Next, fast-growing evergreen trees develop to their fullest, while shade-tolerant trees develop underneath. Eventually, larger deciduous trees will grow over them, and the ecosystem is similar but different from where it began. These disturbances can actually be healthy for an area over time because they can lead to increased biodiversity. Controlled burns are practiced by many park services. The fires help manage weeds and other growth and helps to reduce the risk of wildfires, but it can also help destroy nutrients and lead to more desirable plant growth in the future.
The study of succession has a rich history. Early in the 20th century, botanists E. Warming in Denmark and Henry Cowles in the United States largely developed the concept of ecological succession. Ecological succession is the consistent directional change in species composition through time. The monoclimax hypothesis was developed by Frederick Clemens. It is the theory of plant succession and community dynamics. According to this theory, the community is viewed as a highly integrated superorganism, and the process of succession represents the gradual and progressive development of the community to the ultimate or climax stage. Next is the initial floristic composition hypothesis, which was developed by Frank Egler. So it is the process of succession at any no species is completely superior to another. So succession is individualistic and dependent on the particular species that colonize the site and the order in which they arrive. Some species suppress or exclude others from colonizing the site, which is dependent on which species get there first. So there are three models of succession, and they were developed by Joseph Connell and Ralph Slatier. The first model is the facilitation model. The early successional species modify the environment so that it becomes more suitable for later successional species to invade and grow to maturity. Early stage species, thus facilitation, prepare the way and success for late stage species. The next model is the inhibition model. It involves strong competitive interactions. No one species is completely superior to another, so the first species to arrive holds the site against all invaders and makes the site less suitable for both early and late successional species. The third model is the tolerance model. Later stage species can tolerate low level of resources and is independent of the species that precede or follow them. The later successional species are neither inhabited nor aided by species of previous stages. Next is the three primary plant strategies, and these were developed by J. Philip Grime. So the first primary plant strategy is the ruderal. The species rapidly colonize disturbed sites but are small and short-lived. They allocate resources to reproduction. The next strategy is the competitive ability or the C strategy. So predictable habitats with abundant resources favor species that allocate resources to growth, favoring resource acquisition and competitive ability. Next strategy is the stress tolerant species strategy, or also known as S strategy. So habitats in which resources are limited favor stress tolerant species that allocate resources to maintenance. Following the disturbance that initiates secondary succession, essential resources like light, water, and nutrients are abundant, selecting for ruderal species that can quickly colonize the site. As time progresses and plant biomass increases, competition for resources occurs, selecting for competitive species. As resources become depleted as a result of high demand by growing plant populations, the C species will eventually be replaced by the stress-tolerant species that are able to persist under low resource conditions. Next is the resource ratio hypothesis, and this was developed by David Tillman. So, it is a model of succession based on a trade off in characteristics that enable plants to compete for the essential resources of nitrogen and light. The ability to effectively compete for light is associated with the allocation of carbon to the production of above ground tissues. Conversely, the ability to effectively compete for nitrogen is associated with the production of root tissue. In Tillman's model, the availability of nitrogen and light is inversely related.
This is the end of part 1. Part 2 will be linked in the description box.